I've used this story many times in this, getting back to the Grail stories. In one of the stories, I think it's Chrétien's story, was Percival is on the quest. And he's been, struggling for years through the wasteland looking for the Grail. And he comes upon a lake or a river, and it's the Fisher King is out there. And Ed made an interesting point when he showed, the phonetic correlation between an angler and angle, the word angle. Did he bring that up today? Interesting correlation. Did you, Ed, last night? Yeah. But that's something you frequently bring that up, right? So the angler, the Fisher King, who Percival didn't recognize who he was. It turns out he's the son of the elderly king that is in the nearby castle, debilitated. The Fisher King tells him how to get to the castle Corbenic. He finds his way to the king. They never found it if he hadn't encountered this mysterious fisherman. He goes to the castle Corbenic, and he goes in, and there's this great hall, huge hall, sumptuously decorated, and lots of people there feasting and merriment, and he's seated on a dais there, and then he is presented with this whole pageant where all of these young people come parading through the great hall, carrying artifacts and things, symbols, and one of them, beautiful young maiden, comes through carrying the Grail itself, and it's so resplendent that when she comes into the hall with it, people have to avert their eyes because the light emanating from the Grail is so intense. Now, in his training, Percival had apprenticed to an old knight who had said, don't speak superficially. Don't jabber on and chatter superficially. Keep your repose, keep quiet, do more listening than you do talking, right? It's not seemingly for a knight to just, to speak without, just to speak indiscriminately. So he was keeping this in mind as he's sitting there watching this pageant. What he didn't realize was the whole pageant there was designed for him. And the purpose of it was that he was they were presenting each of the symbols, the candelabra, a bleeding lance, all of these things that were paraded in front of him had a meaning to him, a deep symbolical meaning. And he was supposed to ask the question, what does it mean? What does this whole thing mean that I'm seeing here? And instead, he kept thinking the admonition of the old knight that he had apprenticed under. And so he kept his tongue. He didn't ask the question. He didn't speak. He just observed. So night comes. He goes to a room, goes to sleep, and he wakes up in the morning. And he's the only one in the castle. And it appears as if it's been abandoned for centuries. There's nobody there. It's empty, spider webs and dirt. And he's the only one there. Everything has disappeared. And he wanders back out into the wasteland. And all of a sudden he's accosted by this shrieking old hag who runs up to him and starts screaming at him. You didn't say anything. You didn't ask the question. All of this was done for your benefit, and you were supposed to ask what it meant. And if you had asked what it meant, you would have learned the meaning, and the curse would have been lifted. The landscape would have been healed. The ailing king would have been restored. But you didn't ask the question that needed to be asked, that was begging to be asked. And now you're going to have to wander for years to come to finally conclude this quest. The quest. What is the ultimate idea behind the quest? The question. To ask the question. And now we are being discouraged from asking questions. We are not supposed to ask questions. Graham was attacked by mainstream media because he dared to ask questions. Well, we're going to ask questions because we have a lot of questions, because there are some factions that have a lot of explaining to do. Many of the sculptors and architects of the ancient world were initiates of the mysteries, particularly the Eleusinian rites. Since the dawn of time, the truers of stone and the hewers of wood have constituted a divinely inspired caste. The profound knowledge of mathematics and astronomy embodied in ancient architecture and the equally profound knowledge of anatomy revealed in Greek statuary prove that the fashioners of both were masterminds, deeply cultured in the wisdom which constituted the arcana of the mysteries. Thus was established the Guild of the Builders, progenitors of modern Freemasons. When employed to build palaces, temples, or tombs, or to carve statues for the wealthy, those initiated architects and artists concealed in their works the secret doctrine. So that now, long after their bones have returned to dust, the world realizes that those first artisans were indeed truly initiated and worthy to receive the wages of Master Mason. The most celebrated of the ancient fraternities of artisans was that of the Dionysiac architects. This organization was composed exclusively of initiates of the Bacchus Dionysius cult and was peculiarly consecrated to the science of building and the art of decoration. Acclaimed as being the custodians of a secret and sacred knowledge of architectonics, its members were entrusted with the design and erection of public buildings and monuments. The superlative excellence of their handiwork elevated the members of the guild to a position of surpassing dignity. They were regarded as the master craftsmen of the earth. They made their appearance certainly not later than 1000 BC, which interestingly Freemasons will trace their origins to the building of King Solomon's temple, which occurred right around 1000 BC. And they appear to have enjoyed particular privileges and immunities. They also possessed secret means of recognition and were bound together by special ties only known to themselves. They were divided into communities governed by a master and wardens. They held a grand festival annually and were held in high esteem. Their ceremonials were regarded as sacred. They had means of intercommunication all over the then known world. And from them, doubtless, sprang the guilds of traveling masons known in the Middle Ages. Freemasonry, most of all, owes to the Dionysiac cult the great mass of its symbols and rituals, which are related to the science of architecture. From these ancient and illustrious artisans, it has also received the legacy of the unfinished temple of civilization, that vast invisible structure upon which these initiated builders have labored continuously since the inception of the fraternity. This mighty edifice, which has fallen and been rebuilt time after time, but whose foundations remain unmoved, is the true everlasting house of which the temple on the brow of Mount Moriah was but an impermanent symbol. And that would be the reference to King Solomon's temple. This image is particularly compelling. This is an image that's prevalent in the Masonic order. I'm sure Warren and Ryan have seen this. We have Father Time representing oftentimes Saturn. Remember Saturn, Kronos, right? He has there a great scythe or sickle. And you have this maiden who is weeping over a broken column. She holds in her left hand the ciborium, the grail, sealed with the blood, the royal blood, the holy blood. In her right hand, she holds the acacia, a symbol of rejuvenation and everlasting life. But we also know it's the source of something else. How many of you know? Stephen, what is it?
DMT.
It's the source of DMT. And then we have the hourglass. Notice he's also plaiting or braiding her hair. Long hair. That's a clue. There are several things here that are clues. One is this. We were talking in the first part of this talk about comets, weren't we? Cometa, from the Latin and the Greek, means long-haired. Long-haired. So, because early people seeing comets envisioned a person, usually a maiden, with long hair flowing out, which was the tail of the comet. The broken column, That represents civilization. Aside from the operative aspect of their order, the Dionysian architects had a speculative philosophic code. Human society they considered as a rough and untrued ashlar. That is, the stone when it's first removed from bedrock, only lately chiseled from the quarry of elemental nature. This crude block was the true object upon which these skilled craftsmen labored, polishing it, squaring it, and with the aid of fine carvings, transforming it into a miracle of beauty, because there was a whole process that had to transpire between extracting stone, that rough ashlar, before it could be fitted as part of the cathedral. Okay, so I want to show you something here. We have 2 columns here, part of the 5 architectural orders. Warren? What is the architectural order of these columns? Corinthian, yes. Corinthian is characterized by the foliage emerging from the top of the column. And this indicates a very profound philosophical idea that was held in mind by these builders of old. That is, the stones were erected in such a way that they were like living stones, conduits of literal energy. And that energy, once it was symboled in the right place, with the right orientation, with the right materials, that energy could ascend the column, and that was actually living energy. And so the metaphorical explosion of foliage at the top of the column represents this idea that the life force is traveling up the columns, infusing the temple itself. That's what this is telling you right here. While mystics released their souls from the bondage of matter by meditation, and philosophers found their keenest joy in the profundities of thought, these master workmen achieved liberation from the wheel of life and death by learning to swing their hammers with the same rhythm that moves the swirling forces of the cosmos.